Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nadia Ayari, and I'm a research assistant here at the Donald Ellis Gallery. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's virtual walkthrough of Fast Ponies and War Bonnets, our online exhibition exhibited by Dana Claxton. We here at the gallery, curated, sorry. It's curated by Dana Claxton, and we are at the gallery are particularly thrilled by this exhibition and are excited to share it with you. In fact, we're so thrilled that we made it the inaugural exhibition of our newly launched online platform, which you can access via our website, as well as our presentation for Frieze New York this year, which you can look on our Frieze viewing room. So with regards to this event's format, Dana will be giving a visual presentation of the exhibition for about 15 minutes, which will be followed by a 40 to 45-minute discussion between Don and Dana and yourselves. So to that end, we invite you to pose your questions in the Q&A section, in the Q&A window here at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll begin addressing those questions once Dana's done with the presentation. So now I will quickly introduce Don and Dana and then pass the proverbial mic to our esteemed curator. So Donald Ellis is the founder and owner of Donald Ellis Gallery, an internationally renowned gallery in the field of historical Native American art. Founded in 1976, the gallery maintains a particular emphasis on the art of the Northwest Coast, Inuit, and Plains culture. A recognized authority in the field, Donald Ellis has been instrumental in shaping institutional and private interest in Plains ledger art. The gallery's inventory includes important historical works by Yupik, Navajo, Haida, and Tlingit and Tsimshian artists, as well as a small but significant collection of prehistoric ivories and contemporary Inuit art. And now on to Dana's intro biography. Dana Claxton works in film, video, photography, single and multi-channel video installation, and performance art. Her practice investigates Native American stereotypes, indigenous beauty, the body, socio-political and historical contexts, and spiritual practices. Her work has been exhibited internationally at the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, National Gallery of Canada, Walker Art Center, Vancouver Art Gallery, Sundance Film Festival, and Crystal Bridges, amongst others. She is an associate professor and head of the Department of Art History, Visual Art and Theory with the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Her family's reserve is Wood Mountain, Lakota First Nations, located in Southwest Saskatchewan. She resides in Vancouver, Canada. All right, so now I will be sharing my screen and we will go to the presentation.
There we are.
There we are.
Thank you for that. I want to say and acknowledge that I'm on the ancestral unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh people, and I'm currently in North Vancouver. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad you're all here, and thank you for this invitation to curate this exhibition, and for the opportunity to think about these ledger drawings and these war books, also as they're known as well. We can go to the first, maybe I'll just say about the Fast Ponies and War Bonnets. I've been thinking about, of course, the headdress as war bonnet, as we call them, for a long time, and have done my own work looking at the headdress, where it's the frontal piece, which some of you might know. And, it's a very serious item, the headdress, the war bonnet. And it's just not for anybody to wear. And so, I'm constantly, I think, responding to, sort of those who wear them as a fashion item. And I understand why. Like, I've ever only tried on one, and they feel amazing. And somebody had brought it to me. I had invited peyote singers, Primo and Mike, to come to Vancouver and to do a performance with me. And then we also did a performance at the United Church. And a woman brought a war bonnet to me, and she had it, and I don't know how she was in possession of it. But anyways, I tried it on and it was amazing. And I understand people, the beauty of them as well, but still they're not for everybody to wear. So I'm constantly thinking about that, why people wear them, and perhaps maybe why they shouldn't. So the war bonnet. The fast ponies is also thinking about, in many of these drawings, they're just whipping along. They're going very fast and they're on a mission and they're going somewhere. And I'll also say it's also, I'm paying homage to Nadia and the staff at the Donald Ellis Gallery as well, because they're fast ponies and they're moving very fast, getting the job done. So,
They're here.
so that this is a double inspiration. So we can go to the first image. So, Donald had sent me many images to look at. And initially I was going to, it was for a sort of an exhibition, and I was looking at images, and for some reason I picked all, and I didn't know who any of them were by, and I picked all Lakota drawings. And then when I sent the images back to Donald, I said, these are the ones I like, and they were all Lakota. Of course, I was just like, of course they're all Lakota. And, but in this case, because my thematic was fast ponies and war bonnets. So beginning with this, and what is interesting about the images that I looked at, and there, I think I might have looked at a couple of hundred, but there are hundreds and hundreds of these images. And the images that I was sent, the warrior was always going in the opposite, in one direction in all of them, but there were two that were going in the opposite direction. So I sort of started by showing two in the opposite direction. And so this one here, I should put my glasses on, that's attributed to Wamblihito Rowan Eagle, was from that Rowan Eagle ledger book. And just looking, of course, at the war bonnet, the solo warrior, assuming it's a blonde pony. I mean, also sometimes ponies were painted, but also looking here at just his lovely legging. And so the beaded legging, which would have been on the side of the leg, is that what became apparent in many of these images is a type of also plains, Lakota sometimes, cultural aesthetics through beadwork, regalia. And so, even on his small foot, I thought his foot might be a bit of not true to size, but that, or maybe it's just the tip of his moccasin, but just there's a few embellishments in there as well. And then the embellishments along the leg, and then the tail of the horse tied, and perhaps the under the bit. It's been said that sometimes those are scalps as well. And then he's carrying his eagle staff, and then the long war bonnet. Some were shorter, some were longer, and just the lovely detail of the tips of the feathers of the war bonnet. And then of course his braids, and then he's wearing a bone chest plate and a bone necklace. And his hair probably with fur wraps as well. So it's just these sort of intimate details that are specifically within the realm of Lakota aesthetics, plains aesthetics. We can go to the next one. So another one by Skunk, and I have to say is that I'm just very beginning to research these war books and the significance of them in terms of documents of these war histories and what was going on during this time. If we think of the Great Indian Wars, they went on for decades, decades and decades and decades. The people, and in some cases even my own ancestors, trying to protect their homeland. And I was thinking about war fatigue, how after decades and decades and decades of this, how one must become tired, but that you have to keep going, because otherwise then you're going to get taken over. So they kept going and going and going. And so another lovely image here of just the detail again of the war bonnet, which I had interest in. and he's face painted. He's wearing tatanka, buffalo, probably a bit of a buffalo headdress. He's with the horns, and some type of Western shirt. And then the way the tails are tied again of the horse. Shunka Wonka, I did write a bit about these works, and that, you know, the Horse Nation were considered, you know, they're highly revered, and you know, they were warriors as well. They were equal warriors at battle, and were very honored four-leggeds. Also thinking here, so I was thinking, well, so whether this was also, you know, what do they call, you know, collecting horses, horse thieves, the great Sioux horse thieves, I think is one of the terms. Is, you know, that part of war is, you know, you go and you take your enemy's assets. You know, your enemy's trying to take your land, trying to take your homeland. So you know, when you're in war, you know, these things happen. So I'm not sure what this warrior was doing with the pony. We can go to the next one. Now, I love these ones of Oliver Goodshield. It was the I don't know, it's just the tubular war bonnets that he's drawn. It almost looks like watercolor, but it's ink and color, pencil on paper. And, you know, just the trot. And so over and over again was the horses were almost suspended. Rarely do their feet touch the ground, other than in one of the last images, which is quite interesting, but it could be through some type of spirit energy where the feet are touching the ground. But they're always kind of in full trot. They're always on the move. It's like they're you know, they're going somewhere. And so when these books are thought of as war documentation of war actions, these warrior artists are drawing themselves or their comrades, their other warriors, and they are off, you know, off to battle or in battle in some of the cases. And then another one from the Good Shield as well. And this is, I'm not sure about any kind of fading, but it always, to me, it looks like watercolor, but I know it isn't. Love the tips, of course, of the Wombly, of the eagle feathers, and just, you know, just thinking about the rendering of that. And if we think of the scale, you know, these are quite intimate drawings as well. The paper is 8.5 by 7, so that's, you know, that's not that large. And what I've seen is that the ledger books come in different sizes. So this was 8.5 by 7, but just thinking about these, you know, the warrior's hand drawing these lovely tips and the detail of the eagle feather. Of course, he's wearing a chest plate and a necklace as well. And then just the lovely little lines around his face as well at the top there. And then carrying an eagle staff. And again, full trot, you know, it's just, they're up going somewhere. Now these ones, and it's an anonymous artist, and apparently in some of these ledger books is that they were sometimes drawn by multiple artists. And so multiple anonymous artists in this book, I think, because there seems to be a few different hands in this book. And this was the one that really sort of said, you know, okay, I want to be a video flip book. And because the cinematic qualities and the movement forward. So it's all going in one direction, and we'll look at the video flip book after, but they're all going in one direction. These warriors are all going to, you know, I don't know, they're all going to, you know, to defeat Custer, but they're going somewhere, and they're definitely in battle. And you can see that through the images of wounded horses, ground combat, and indigenous and non-indigenous men being wounded. Also, I was thinking about this, is that, I don't know if I cut this one out, but the scale of these ones, I don't know if I have, that one, you know, they're small. They're small. They're like 3 inches by 5 3/4. And so then, this I was pondering last night, of course, then I was thinking about just the delicacy of, again, the headdress, war bonnet lines, and the type of, intimate moments of the warrior artist drawing, even his lovely, how his rope sort of is uh, roped around a few times, some type of, leaving the village, the teepee, if we think of the teepees on the right hand side, and then the horses in front of him. And then of course carrying the gun. And I was thinking how, at some points and different times, guns were illegal for American Indians to have. And then at one point it became illegal to sell ammunition. So, the warring playing field sometimes was very uneven. And so these warriors had to be creative, of course, with the war club. I mean, that's an incredible instrument of war. And I mean, it's, war is always unfortunate. But when you are in that space of war, you have to use instruments. You have to, so the War Club, I think, is this amazing technology, because there was ground combat, with the War Club. And so, but looking through these, and I mentioned in my essay, the cadence of looking through these, because they were going fast, they were action packed, this action is going on, and it was heightened for me. It's actually emotional and heightening for me to look at these images, because they represent, Indigenous war and the battles that were going on, and the centuries that those battles, or the amount of time that these battles were going on. We're talking, 40 years, kept going and going and going. And, if we think about, the expansion of the West and it moving out to the West, it was just constant. And here's another one of online battle, or on the ground battle of on-ground combat. So just thinking, I think it's important to think about the scale of this particular book as well. Very intimate. We can go to the next. Now this one is, and Donald first showed this to me it was on your cell phone, I think. You showed me an image of it, and I looked at it, because by then I had maybe looked at 100 drawings, and you notice immediately that this is not a common drawing, and you don't see warriors or members around a drum very much, and this is completely ceremonial. It's also not on the lined drawing paper, and when I looked at the other side of this, it seems like it was in the partially back of the book that they're touching, because on the other side, you can see these faint images of the headdresses. So, but this was so, I think, rare and unique, because they're heading into ceremony. The man who's painted yellow is completely ready and painted up for ceremony. And then, of course, it's so intriguing to see the woman in the, I guess it's to the left, isn't it? To the left, thank you. And there are images of women in ledger drawings, mostly the love and courting scenes, and then some of more family community scenes. But in the war books, there's not visibly a lot of women, but we also don't know, I realized, because there were women warriors, some significant women warriors, and and we don't know exactly how they would be depicted. So I'd have to do, I can't say, I'd have to do more research, but that there's there's women warriors, of course, and that how they're depicted in how they're depicted in ledger drawings as warriors is another matter, because they could have taken on some male regalia. Sometimes these warriors would also take on the enemy's regalia and wear the blue coats and be, and be dressed as the cavalry. But certainly, and I've worked on a project in regards to Running Eagle, and she was a Blackfoot warrior from Canada, and she fought quite hard. And it was Beverly Hungry Eagle, actually, or Hungry Wolf, who brought her forward to me a number of years ago. And then there was Moving Robe. She walks with her shawl, and she was quite the warrior and began fighting when she was about 17. And I don't have enough information about her. All I know is that they were women warriors, and they fought alongside their brothers, their fathers, their husbands. And so who's to say which, you know, I can't tell. I don't know. Like I said, this is my first foray into ledger drawings and war books. So this image is so unique. And there's a ceremony going on. They are sitting with the drum and just loving this. And we think again, the intimacy of scale. And but I love the fellow who one of the four men around the drum, and he's green. And so, you know, I don't know if he's painted green, like why the artist chose to paint him green. And and also with his I'm assuming those are bells hanging from him as well. And then, but the woman, we can tell she's a woman by her shell net, her shell that are tied to her braids. And then, you know, maybe this is because sometimes I notice in the word or in the ledger drawings, they would put a bit of rouge, sort of some makeup on women. So, but to even see her in this capacity and what her role might be here, whether she's a medicine woman or she's a warrior woman, because she's there by herself, this could be a ceremony for her as, you know, a great warrior woman. So it's a fascinating image, I have to say. It really is. Just looking at some more of the details. And the scale, and then, oh yeah, also, so in terms of being sort of the cooking shot or the, you know, the above the head shot, like, so also the angle of this is different than a lot of the other ones, which are these sort of straight on side, you know, side views. So this is a type of an aerial view. And we can go to the next. Make sure I'm like, if I oh, now, okay, like, you know, I have to be careful here, you know, because like these are really powerful images. And I realize that, you know, an image is an image, and then an image has mana, you know, and image isn't a dead surface, you know, and as we know, the spirit of art and how it travels, right? And what it gives us. And the experiences that we get when we're viewing art or being with art or when we go inside art. And so this one as well, when this one, there was two of these Shugawalkas, the holy dog, as the Lakota would call the horse. And but you know, so in terms of the pony going fast all the time, legs in the air, this is one of the few, for I don't know, it just seemed that it's floating in a different type of way, you know, like it's not like the fast pony riding to war, riding off to, you know, to defeat Custer or whatever you know, wherever they were going for war. This pony is not in that same realm. This pony is in its own realm, and there's a relationship to the cosmos, to the divine, and it's a very metaphysical drawing. That's what I can say about that. Oh, let's watch the, so this is a video flip book. It's lovely. I mean, it's so lovely. I have to say, I don't know. I invited Henry Robideau. I don't know if he was able to make it today, but it was Henry Robideau, a Vancouver photographer and artist who introduced me to the video flip book. So I want to thank him for that, because now I've made a few, and so it was great to have the gallery make this for this occasion.
Should I exit the presentation, Dana?
Sure, thank you.
Okay, I will stop sharing the screen now. As some of you may have noticed, I lost my Oslo context for some reason, for technical reasons, but so we'll move on to the Q&A section. And what we will do is I'll just ask quickly, engage Don a little bit. And I was wondering, Don, if you can tell us how the idea of having Dana curate the show come about.
Well, that's been discussed in the last few days between Dan and I. There seems to be two versions of history here, but I believe what happened was in 2016, Dana sent me an email unsolicited. I did not know, I knew of her by reputation, but we did not know each other. I believe it was around a Vancouver Art Gallery auction. I had donated a ledger drawing to a benefit auction, and I believe she had offered, she had donated, I don't know if it was one of your fireboxes, Dana, or still a photograph, I don't recall. At any rate, other that, she sent me an email that apparently I didn't respond to. I was told yesterday. And that somehow over time evolved. We were sat next to each other by I think by design at two events at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And then about a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, I contacted Dana to see if she would be willing to write an essay in it for a new publication that Donald Ellis Gallery was attempting to put together. And she wholeheartedly agreed. And from that, we ended up becoming COVID walkabout mates. We've been going on walks once a week or so for most of COVID, which has been a real joy for me. And one day we were sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean, and I had just acquired the Goodwin sheets, and I was showing her, she was looking at them on my phone, flipping through them, and she was just captivated. And she said, "Man, this is like cinematic." And I said, "Would you be interested in curating an exhibition of these drawings?" And she said, "I don't know anything about them." And I said, "You don't need to know anything about them." And here we are. I'm always curious about an artist's eye, particularly Lakota's artist's eye, and how they engage with these drawings. Because as you know, Nadia, we've had the experience exhibiting these and the way artists particularly respond to these drawings. So it just seemed like a really cool idea to have a Lakota artist.
Yeah. And for me, just being involved and somewhat being less involved than you in the process of watching and hearing about Dana curate this, I was really struck by the final selection. And I was wondering if I can take a moment and just ask you, Dana, if you, I know that in your process, you printed most of the images out, as we also through just your presentation now. I think it was very important for you to have a simulacra of the actual thing. And it sounded like there was a very particular rhythm that you were looking for, and a rhythm created in the exhibition, which I find to be very much felt. I really feel it from the exhibition. Can you talk about that sort of that rhythm and then the order that you chose to lay the exhibition out in?
Because you were quite specific in how you wanted it laid out.
So, you know, as an artist and also as a curator, I actually entered into the larger art community in Vancouver, and immediately got labeled a curator, but was at an artist-run center where I was programmed, where I was bringing together Indigenous art, contemporary artists, and then from there have curated in many different contexts. And so that's one thing, is that not new to curating. But what I find is working with, you know, art, and especially when you're working with, you know, you're whether you're in a vault looking at work, or you're doing studio visits, or, you know, after a while, after you see many works of art, the work of art will tell you what to do. Anyways, that's been my experience. It'll tell you what to do, and and not that it's, and it will tell you who it wants to be with, and it just, so having all of these images out on the kitchen table and then looking through them, and they all started to, it's sort of process of, making the first round and then going through others, but they, began to make sense together, and how they could glide in with each other, and how they could be with each other, and have that movement, because these works are also about movement as much as they are about warring and these histories of war and Indigenous aesthetics. It's about movement as well, not only in the image itself, but the movement of the expansion of the West, the movement in going into battle, the movement of safety, the movement. So there was so much movement. So I wanted to have that when you're with the exhibition physically, but also I think it works looking online, but that there's a particular movement to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad I came across.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the questions we're getting are very specific to particular drawings. So I'm wondering if everyone would be okay with this sort of staying in this general field. And then if you have specific questions about particular drawings, we'll take those later. We'll email you about them. But just to use this time that we have with Dana for her opinions on things that are more specific. So more general to the concept of the show. So to that end, movement is important, but another thing that seemed to be very important was urgency, and understanding how urgent. You posed this question about what do these works mean in the context of this urgency of depiction. And I'm wondering, and you sort of touch on that, if you'd like to sort of expand a little bit on your thoughts of their urgency now in communicating what was happening then and its implication to contemporary, contemporary drawing, essentially.
Thank you for the question. For one, is that they bring forward a particular visual analysis of war history and war history of the Americas, because sometimes I think that people forget, or that this amazing, I don't know if amazing is the right word, but this challenging war history that that United States has, right, with Indigenous people, that it's a war history. It's a war history, the battles that went on for the protection of land. And so that's one thing, is that to continue to have that part of the narrative, that, that if we think of the amount of bloodshed on the land is enormous. So that's one thing, to keep that current in our analysis of relations as well, because I think it impacts social relations. If we think of the stereotypes of, the crazy wild Indian, and I'm not going to use the S word, but the crazy wild Indian, and that, in Hollywood depictions and all of those silly things, right? At the same time, there was deep strategic war tactics that these figures in these books were implementing. And and there was many battles that were won, and it was an uneven playing ground. So I'm interested in that and how it impacts social relations today, still to this day, but also the aesthetic properties. And we, like, for instance, my home reserve, Wood Mountain, is that we have very specific Lakota Wood Mountain beading designs that are from our community, and so it's looking at that relationship also to historical imagery as well.
Yeah, I believe in the text you call it this moment of self-representation in the 19th century, in a moment of, which had great implications. So I'm just glad we got to talk about that, because that's, for me, the thing that strikes me very strongly about these works as well, that they're powerful moments of self-representation in a very problematic time.
At a very particular time in history. Yeah.
Exactly. So I will I'll keep going. I will take another question. I'll pose a question that you and I actually, the three of us have discussed, and I'll be reading an excerpt from the curatorial statement, because what emerges, you spoke in the beginning of this talk about the importance of the fast ponies as a motif, and then the war bonnets as a motif. And there's another motif that seems to be very important, which is the motif of line. That becomes very strong, the idea of the line. And I have here an excerpt that reads it and discusses the Wamblihito, the Roan Eagle ledger pages, in which you say, the verticality of the faint blue ledger lines running top to bottom with the warriors on Shukawaka, seemingly cutting through as though the horizontality of indigenous philosophy, which takes care of the tribe/collective, equally fluidly disrupts hierarchies, not only of the imperial picture plane, but of Western drawing itself. Would you mind unpacking that thought for us a little?
Thank you for that. I guess also thinking about the value of drawing and what kind of drawing is valued. And, certainly Leonardo, Da Vinci was an amazing drawer. And some of these ledger drawings I put on the same plane as that drawing. So it was also looking at the perspective of what kind of drawing is valued and how we might even be teaching drawing and how we value drawing is one thing. But in terms of the verticality in the horizontality, is that okay? So this is a replica of a war book. And so if we think about it, it's horizontal, it's vertical. So then you have the warrior artist taking it and then drawing horizontally. And but when you turn it from the vertical to the horizontal, the lines again become vertical, and then the warrior draws horizontally within that. So it's like this battle is going on in the book as well. So it's like horizontal, vertical, horizontal. And I think that's really interesting. And, if we think of that in some of the Sioux renderings, if we think of the vast plains landscape and infinity, and, so some you can't, they're not about necessarily where one is situated in the landscape, but I think it's where one is situated in the universe, but also taking the book, which was part of, the West's and colonial power apparatus. If we think of the written text in the book. So, it's now void. It's void of text. It's no longer a place for the English written word. And if we think, these ledger books were used for, Wild West capitalism accounting. It could have been the shopkeeper or the clerk at the general store, 10, what am I thinking? 10 fence posts and two bob wire rolls, and then they were taking those fence posts and of course partitioning off indigenous land. Or if the Indian agent was writing, 10 pounds of flour to Red Cloud, or cavalry charting out some of their movements. So these were significant books in many ways that were used for various reasons of accounting. And so the warrior artist took out the text and transformed them, and that then they become a picture book through, if we think of what storytelling is, or winter counts, or generally through the spoken word is how history has been conveyed in indigenous communities and culture. So that the book, the Western book of that documented Wild West capitalism or cowboy capitalism has been indigenized in some ways. It's been indigenized through warrior drawing. I love that.
And that brings us to one of the questions being posed here. I think maybe we just suppose people knew a lot about ledger drawing, but the question is from Melissa Uram, under what circumstances were ledger drawings created? Just to inform everyone, maybe this will be helpful for the rest of our conversation. Were they spontaneously done, or were they solicited by others?
I can speak to that a little bit. There's no simple answer to that question. They, what's most important to understand here is that these pictographic images are a means of recording history and acts of valor. And this is a community that has no written words. So the act of recording history is done through pictography, which started literally with cave paintings and petroglyphs that evolved into buffalo hides and teepee liners. And when the access to Western materials, i.e. ledger books and pencils and crayons, happened primarily in the middle of the 19th century, then that same system continued. Now, in particular ledger books, I know there's I noticed a question here also. We know for a fact that a lot of the earlier ledger books were commissioned by military officers. They had indigenous scouts who worked for the military. And ironically, I suppose, as these military people were trying to eradicate indigenous people, they were also occasionally asking them to record their histories for them. So there's a lot of the early books from the 1860s, sort of the pre-reservation, pre-Fort Marion period books were commissioned by military officers.
Mhm.
War books are slightly different. The gallery has a group of drawings known as the Tie Creek Ledger that that the history, we don't know this for fact, but the summation is that this war book had fallen from a tree burial in Cheyenne territory in the 1870s, and two hunters, Western American, Euro-American hunters, had discovered this book at the base of a tree. So there are many ways these drawings were created, and there are many ways that they left the hands of indigenous artists into Euro-American hands.
Mhm.
There's no simple answer. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no simple answer to that.
Mhm. Yeah. And we're also getting some questions on that same vein, if we can speak to the provenance of the Goodwin ledger, and then also Dana, how you feel about where ledger art, where ledger books should be held for the public or private realm, essentially.
I'll answer the first bit. The Goodwin ledger has no significant history, unfortunately. It turned up at an auction in Santa Fe in the 1980s and as a full book, and got broken up along the way. But before the 1980s, there's unfortunately no specific history with the Goodwin book. Dana, you have a harder question to answer.
What's the question?
So this is how do you feel about where ledger art should be held for the public or private realm?
Well, I think it should be for both. You know, I mean, I know these things are always fraught. You know, whenever we're thinking about historical indigenous art, they're fraught. We want to hold people accountable. We want to have access for scholarship and research, and for locating all kinds of histories. That's one thing. And but I think that they should be in both places, and especially if they are in private collections, that then they, you know, collectors make them available for research and exhibition.
Yeah,
I hope that answers the question.
I think that does. John, a question for you, just given the success of the experience we've all had with working with Dana, and hopefully Dana's enjoyed working with us. Are you thinking of other ways? Can you sort of expound on other ways you're thinking about showing these ledger works in non-traditional sort of, or outside of how we usually show them, which has been frankly in art fairs and collaboration exhibitions?
Yes, we have lots of ideas and plans that unfortunately COVID had put a little stop in, but I think that for me personally, and I can't take credit for it, my as Dana so aptly put it, my fast ponies came up with an idea a year or two ago about having doing a tour, a museum exhibition tour to Indigenous communities where these drawings were originally created. So we were at the beginning phases of developing this exhibition tour that will travel through North Dakota and South Dakota and Wyoming and then down to Cheyenne and Arapaho Territory and Oklahoma at Indigenous run cultural centers and institutions. And there was going to be a catalog about it, which was started this process with Dana, where I asked her if she would participate in this. And I have to say that I've created a monster with Miss Claxton. She is extraordinarily, she's extraordinarily enthusiastic, and out of that is come her ideas that she said, well, it can't just be in Canada, it can't just be in the United States. This has to come to Canada. So now we're working on a sort of a separate beginning stages again of a separate exhibition tour that will go through Canada, 4 or 5 institutions in Canada. So, you know, my focus here has been from the outset. And again, I know I've said this in other talks, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself to some people, but, you know, I was marginally involved in the 1996 show at the Drawing Center in New York, which was really the first time that these drawings were shown in the larger art world, and it set the art world on its ear. I mean, people just were blown away. And still to this day, it's kind of amazing how many people don't know these actually exist, that these drawings actually exist. We had a curator, the first time, you'll remember this, Nadia, the first time we exhibited in New York in, I believe, 2015 or 16 at the Armory Show, we had a major drawings curator from one of the major museums in the world stand in the middle of our stand and say, what the hell are these? So for some reason, I think I've taken upon myself and my crew now with Dana's help. These need to be, people need to be made aware of these drawings. They're an extraordinary aspect of American art history, and people need to know about them. And we're trying to do our job to see that that happens. Beyond buying and selling them, it's a much bigger project than a commercial gallery's attempt to, you know, buy and sell drawings. This is we have a bigger idea around this. And I thank Dana for participating.
Well,
I think.
Thanks for inviting me. I mean, yeah, I just, you know, as you can see, I'm very enthusiastic about these and have, you know, still, you know, more research to do on them. And, but I think they're important for many reasons, and just for Indigenous art history, for American art history, I know that there's the one that we know of, the one Dakota artist from Carry the Kettle. He did works as well. So
yeah, surprisingly, there are, this is another area of research that I've been on off and on for 20 years, but there are surprisingly few known documented Canadian drawings. The Glenbow has a series of drawings. There's a wonderful little group of drawings in the Osoyos Historical Society, I believe it's called. But there are not that many known documented books from Canada. I'm sure there are more that have probably been misdocumented over time. But more work to be done.
I have another question for you, Dana. I'm curious, and it's a question that's coming to me now. Can you speak about the importance of why you replicate things physically? If that has to do, because we're getting a comment here about the mana, if that has to do with being able to connect with the artwork better for you?
thanks for that question. Yeah, well, it was, yeah, I mean, and I didn't cut these out until last night, right? So, and I've had them now for maybe a few months, but I didn't cut them out. But, and I was I was going over this, the slide presentation and then thinking, yeah, those are, what scale is that?
Mhm.
So I cut it out of a piece of cardboard and I thought that, and that's, so then I had to see them at the scale. I had to look at them closely at that scale and imagine the warrior artist drawing these. And yeah, so it, like I said, these books were, have their, I'm sure in some cases, and not all cases, especially ones that were, maybe more commercialized. I don't think they ever became part of a tourist trade though, that I've read yet. But these books were, I believe that for the warriors, they had certain types of mana for them. And so that's what interests me as well.
Mhm.
Actually, there is a small, Dana, there is a small element of tourist trade. Well, perhaps not small, starting with Fort Marion. The Fort Marion drawings, the commander of Captain Pratt encouraged, they were the enslaved warrior artists were allowed to leave the fort during the day and engage with tourists and sell them drawings. And that began. And then we know, Nadia, you may be able to help me here. I think we know that at least 3 of the Fort Marion artists, warrior artists, continued once they left Fort Marion back to the reservoir, wherever they went to, continued to make drawings to sell as a form of economy.
Howling Wolf being.
Howling Wolf being the most prominent example of that, yes.
And just to go back to, I'll take the opportunity of talking about mana and these drawings. And I know this show exists in a digital space, but to advocate maybe that we try to put this show together physically. And I know there's been a little bit of talk of that, but I think it would be really important to see these works in the same space.
Absolutely.
Connected.
Absolutely.
Just because what Dana's done is so particular. And I think that should really be viewed in vivo.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And again, kudos to Dana for doing these by digital images. I mean, she's been able to do this via digital images. I would really relish the opportunity to actually put these drawings in front of her so that she could experience them. So.
Likewise.
A larger exhibition. I mean, the kind of, movement and story one could tell with different groupings, or it's, there's I think a lot to be seen and felt and thought about, through a physical exhibition for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to do it. Well, are we wrapping up?
I feel like that's a good note to wrap up on. So to that end, thank you, Dana, so much for all your hard work on the exhibition and also for participating in this talk. Thank you for everyone that's attended. And from Donna and I, we, look forward to seeing you at the next thing.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
How do I get out of here?
I don't know.